Hi, I hope you are well. This podcast is a place for people to share personal and professional perspectives, talk openly, and ask questions. From serious to silly to sublime, it's all about communication and connection. Always coming from a place of kindness and curiosity, we talk about shared humanity, discuss ideas, and highlight people creating a better world. We've got to keep learning, keep growing, keep being. I'm Melissa Beek, and this is Beek on Being. Today's episode is Beek on Being Bullied. In every conversation with other parents or guests that I have had on, either off the podcast or on the podcast, the same topic emerges, that they themselves or their children have experienced being bullied. We discuss the impact and the tolls it takes on a person and a family, how to address it, how to handle it, what are the emotional costs, what can we do, and how do we respond in our communities. Thankfully, today, we have licensed psychologist Dr. Carly Gernon and licensed mental health counselor Anais Torres to educate and inform us. So welcome. I'm so thrilled to have you both here.
Thank you. We're so
I
excited.
So excited.
Names. I'm so
No,
sorry.
that was beautiful.
Okay. I'm terrible when I'm reading from a script. But thank you. I'm so honored that you both are here. So before we start, will you tell our listeners a little bit about both of you and how you got into your professions?
Absolutely.
Sure.
Take
You
it.
first, yeah.
So my name is Anais Torres. I'm a licensed mental health counselor and licensed professional counselor, depending on the state where I'm licensed. I'm also a qualified supervisor in the state of Florida for registered mental health counselor interns. I really have loved what I've done. I've been in mental health now for about 19, maybe 20 years. I don't even know. And more recently, I've specialized in eating disorders in the last 12 years. I got into mental health because psychology was the one course that really just embodied everything that I loved about just being a human and sharing space with other humans.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is it.
Yeah.
And so I started my journey. I did all of my training at Jackson Memorial Hospital. I did more of a medical health psychology background where I worked in both outpatient psychiatry and mental health, as well as inpatient mental health and medical liaison unit. I worked at the Ryder Trauma Center. I also worked in Ward D with the inmates. So I've had a plethora
A varied experience.
very varied experience. And eating disorders was never a part of it,
Right.
ironically. But we know statistically it was. And so I've worked in eating disorders in the last 12 years. I just started working in a higher level of care once upon a time in residential, and I loved it.
Amazing.
And so now I'm also a professor at Florida International University. I teach 3 courses there. One of them where I will be pulling information from, Psychology of Adolescence.
Love
We'll
it.
be talking a lot about everything that I cover in that class, psychotherapy and personality disorders.
Oh, fascinating. Okay, good. I love it. We've got a lot there.
Thank you.
I feel like I learn more every time someone introduces themselves about what they do too. Hi, I'm Dr. Carly Gernon. I'm so excited to be here today. I am a psychologist who I feel like I always knew I wanted to be a part of the mental health field. From a young age, I was like a deep feeling teen and would feel so lonely in my deep feelings. I wouldn't share them outside of the home. And my first therapist was really like the first place I opened up and shared that. So in undergrad, I had a professor who told me about the University of Denver and this ID program where they, from the jump in the program, you get to do a plethora of every type of clinical experiences. And that's really what I wanted. So I specialize in infant early childhood mental health, really learning about that attachment piece and how that then shows up later in life, working a lot with substance use, and then worked at trauma clinics, college counseling, high schools. Within the Miami community, I worked at a government-funded rehab facility, the Head Start program. And so really this wide array. And currently, I kind of found my passion of working more so with adolescents, young adults, adults and couples, really looking at the relational piece of early attachment, parenting piece, friendship, peer piece, and of course, like the relational, intimate relationship piece, working with both relationships and trauma. I love using more of a modality of the therapeutic rapport. So really like the therapeutic relationship being at the foundation of all of the work for my clients to feel really safe in processing those pieces while integrating other pieces of like attachment, behavioral techniques, as well as EMDR to kind of get that full rounded picture.
Yeah, it's a lot of modalities. That's great. So you guys are fabulous already. That's it. This is terrific. I'm so excited. So specifically today on bullying, can we start by defining what bullying is?
Do you want to
So I think, one of the things that Carly and I have been talking about in preparation for this is that bullying has really widened the scope of what bullying is. Before, with us growing up, we knew what bullying was.
Right.
It was more direct, and it was more overt. It
Easily
was
identifiable.
Easily identifiable. And so, the kid who was physically, hurting another child, or, the constant humiliation, the teasing in front of other people, we knew that. Those
Right.
were kind of like the it things.
Right.
Now, bullying has really expanded.
Right.
To a point where it really is, and I use this word all the time because it really speaks to it. It's so insidious. It is everywhere.
Yeah.
I'm a mom of two boys, ages 12 and 7, and I've seen it. I've, unfortunately have experienced it as a parent as well as myself growing up.
Yeah.
But there's so many different avenues to bullying now. It's not just, hitting the kid.
Not just on the playground.
It's not. It's now, now they're texting one another. They're on social media.
Right.
They're getting it from so many different vantage points,
Right.
unfortunately. And this is where we're really seeing the crack in mental health for adolescents. We also know the unfortunate side that a lot younger kids are now dealing with major depression,
Yeah.
as well as unfortunate suicidality.
Exactly.
And I think that that's really like the head of what we're talking about today. So
Right.
I think the overall definition is that it's just almost everywhere and in
Right.
everything to some capacity.
Right.
Absolutely. And I think we can ground ourselves in, because the word carries so much weight. I
Yeah.
think one way parents or individuals who have experienced or are experiencing bullying is can kind of ground themselves in there's normally this power imbalance taking place. It's this repetitive nature, right? So it's not this one time event. It's something
Constant.
that continues coming down. And I think when you're talking about this nature of it happening now all of the time, there's this huge piece of it that I think gets hidden a lot, which is that like exclusion form of bullying. And I notice that so much with my teen clients. We see it a lot like that 12 to 14 range for
Right.
bullying, and this exclusion that used to be more hidden at the lunch table now
Right. You can't sit
because
with
of their
us.
phones,
Right.
the lunch table has moved to the phone and the group chat and the party that someone can see from laying in their bed and knowing that they aren't invited, and they
Right.
continue to not be too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what you said is insidious, and I think what you said was right, power imbalance. So we talked a little bit about the different types of bullying. There's the physical, there's the verbal, there's the social, the emotional bullying. Are there core elements to bullying that sort of go along the whole scope of it?
I would say the power imbalance, the like continual nature, so
Aggression.
the aggression, the repetition piece, and then the intent to cause harm, the intent to use that power piece to put the other person down.
So how does someone differentiate from, like we talked before we started recording, gentle teasing to like full on being bullied? Besides consistency, like what does bullying look like nowadays?
So I think one thing it can look like, especially for parents, that's really helpful, is we often see bullying at the age where a child, maybe a teen, starts telling their parent less. And it can be really hard to tell, hey, did you get teased today? Or is this a form of bullying? With bullying, we can see less school attendance. So wanting to go to school, wanting to go to school less. So a lot more school refusal. And we can see grades start going
Slipping.
down. So we can actually see this piece of
Right. Detachment. Sort of.
from friends.
And I would add to that the other piece that I see a lot, both clinically in our work, but also just from the maternal piece, is the somatic complaints, right? And going hand
Absolutely.
in hand with the school refusal. I can't go to school today. My head hurts. My
Right.
stomach hurts. Mom, I've been telling you that my stomach has been hurting for
Right.
X amount of days. And it's like,
That's
GI
anxiety,
symptom
right,
correct.
yeah.
And we know
Absolutely.
that anxiety is the one that shows up in childhood
Right.
versus depression that tends to happen a little bit later in
Right.
life. And how do kids express themselves?
They manifest it physically.
They manifest it physically. So then we start seeing all those somatic complaints, and it's just compounded. And
Yeah.
over time, we're really seeing it in the day to day versus a quick snapshot.
Right.
I love that you shared that. I find oftentimes when I'm doing the parent intake, the first thing the parent will say that their first clue was is the stomach ache before school, because that's this fight or flight response saying this place doesn't feel safe
Right.
for me. There's something about this that says danger.
Right.
Yeah. There's that piece. There's the physiological aspect. There's also the piece that our children are not the best communicators, and they're not supposed to be, right?
Right.
That is developmentally
Especially when they get to the
appropriate.
teenage years, there's a certain sort of like
Pushback.
Yes, there's a pushback.
A
There's
normal
also right. They're trying to get this sense of agency,
their
but the
own
other
identity,
piece-
separate from you.
Absolutely, is that then they'll start saying or thinking, well, if I pose it as a stomach ache, right?
Right.
Then mom will be able to, secure that a little bit more
Right.
versus me saying, no, I don't want to go to school
Right.
because of X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And so it becomes a little bit easier for them to also communicate in an ineffective way, but
Right.
it's what they know
And feel heard.
and feel heard.
And taken care of, because
Absolutely.
you have a stomach ache, honey. Well, let me make you feel better. So there's that comfort and that security that they wanted, but coming from the physical sense, not from expressing it, that they needed it from a mental health standpoint. So,
Absolutely.
are there myths about bullying?
Oh, so many. I think one is, and I think now it's getting more and more debunked, but still there is like, it makes you tougher, right? We know I work a lot with adult men. I worked a lot with adult men at rehab facilities. And what we know is that early bullying, any bullying, but that early bullying, there's a higher chance later in life of anxiety, of depression, right?
Shame.
And so the shame of it, especially for the young boys, be tough, be a big boy, right? Like,
Right.
this is really good for you. It happened to me. This isn't good for their system. This is something our systems will actually hold on to.
Right.
And something that you and I talked about the other day along the same lines is we are hearing that message of, oh, it happened to me. Like, we all get bullied, and it's like, yes and no, right? Like, the bullying
Different.
is so different nowadays. But then it's also this nature of, it's this ongoing repetitiveness. It's not just this one time
No, it's
thing.
constant trauma.
It's constant trauma. And along the lines of trauma, right? It's just like when individuals endure other forms of trauma that we, see in a different lens. Yes, they came out more resilient. Sure. Right. Unfortunately.
Right.
Right. But nobody wishes trauma upon
Right.
people.
Right.
Why are we thinking?
And not everybody comes out more resilient from trauma.
Correct.
Yeah.
100%. And why are we almost like wishing in some way of like, oh, well, they needed a little bit of that tough skin. They needed a little bit of bullying.
Yeah.
Like,
It's
no.
not acceptable.
No, it's not
Yeah.
acceptable. And it's not a necessary
Yeah.
component of our
For
development.
growth.
Well,
Yeah.
I also think we're at such a tough time with technology
Yeah.
that while parents will empathize absolutely with, everyone can remember a time in middle school they did not feel like they belonged, or a time
Right.
where it really, really hurt.
Yeah.
Now it follows them home. So this place
Right.
that used to then signal to their bodies, I am safe, I get to step away from this. Now it's in their nervous
Right.
system all
Right.
of the time.
Right.
I think that's a beautiful,
I think that's spot
beautifully
on.
said
Yeah.
statement, because it does. There's no.
It's invasive.
Right.
Yeah.
There's no parameter to it. Before, we used to leave it at school.
Right.
It was our bully that was at school, and we went home, and that was it. But
Right.
now we have social media. Now we have our
Right.
phones. We have our computers.
Yeah.
And it's, unfortunately, as parents, we have to start looking out for these things because our kids are not sharing it. They feel like it's also a normal piece.
Right.
But then when you look through messages and different DMs and things of that nature, you're seeing where they're being bombarded
Yeah.
by bullying.
It's constant.
It's constant.
And is it different types of bullying from, let's say, what could have been your inner friend group to maybe a tough teacher to family members, or
We can have bullying any dynamic, right? So it could be with a teacher or coach. It could be with a classmate. I think the really interesting thing when it's with an adult is this was your space that was supposed to be safe.
right? This is someone supposed to guide you.
And on the other hand, as a teen, you're whole system is working towards belonging.
Mm-hmm.
So all of you like chemically want so badly to belong.
Right.
And so I think it leads to two different impacts, but two impacts nonetheless.
Okay. All right. So what about the population? You said it's mostly sort of teenagers, preteens.
So we know the highest age would be 12 to 14.
Right.
It's that teenage age. But I think with phones, we're seeing such a shift in it, depending on maybe when
Younger
a child
or-
younger.
yeah.
And we know puberty's also happening now younger
Yes.
as well.
True.
Yes, very, very good point. But we are seeing it younger. Unfortunately, we're seeing it even in kindergarten.
Yeah.
Where it's like, how did we get here? We didn't experience that, growing up. And, to your point, like the puberty piece is also really impacting that.
True.
But it's like I said, it's so much more enduring now versus what we used to see.
So can we talk a little bit more about that? The invasiveness that follows you home with Snapchat and or TikTok or all
Instagram,
those
all
things,
of them.
Instagram, all of it. Is it part of the responsibility of the parent or the school to say, like you said, at lunchtime with the phones, maybe they shouldn't have their phones at lunchtime, or maybe children are getting on Snapchat or TikTok too young, or
I think it's so tricky, and I say this to parents all of the time, because I see almost every teen I see communicates with their friends via Snapchat. And so we take away their way to communicate. Now we're putting them on
at
the
a greater
outside.
disadvantage.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And also Snapchat messages go away. There's this like safety for kids to feel, or teens to feel like they can say whatever they want to say, and there's no proof of it. And
Right.
so it's this both situation and this tricky situation. I would say also having at home increase in connection. So even randomly, not even connected to it, bringing up a time where maybe you felt like you were on the outskirts of your friends, or maybe you bring up a time where your friends were all going to dinner and you weren't invited, just to open the lines of communication to make it feel safer to communicate. And also maybe having boundaries around phone time, depending on age, whether that means phone usage happens in the living room or after a certain time of night, phone goes away. So
or
the
not
nervous
during
system
meals.
can heal.
Right.
Bedtime, I think, is another really big one.
Yeah.
That I see both myself personally as well as clinically, is that I'm having to tell parents, like, this is a very hard piece to navigate, but you need to take the phone away at bedtime, because it's not just what the content that they're getting. It's also this constant connection to this vehicle that has everything, both good and bad.
Yeah.
And bringing that into that headspace where you're trying to go to sleep is a very tricky situation. I think the phone usage, and I always say this also, like, I get it. As a mom, it's so hard. It's so tricky. They're at a point, right? My 12-year-old is a preteen. They're at a point where they're trying to develop the sense of agency. They're trying to be independent. You want to cultivate that for them, and for them to feel good about themselves. And then you also have to snoop.
Yeah.
Unfortunate.
Do you? You
I
have to
do.
snoop. Okay.
I do. And I have that conversation though.
Right.
So
You're open about it.
I'm open about it.
Got
So
it.
I'm not going behind his back. I
Right.
just let him know, hey buddy, from time to time I am going to look through.
Right.
I'll do it quickly. It's not to look, item per item and text per text, but I want to get a general sense that you are okay.
Right.
And that you're being protected. And unfortunately, I know it feels a lot of times like you know what you're doing.
But you're figuring it out.
You're figuring it out, and you're
Right.
not supposed to know. And we are your parents. We have to step in and help protect you where the world sometimes may feel unsafe.
Okay.
So I do have that open dialogue so that it doesn't feel like I'm reading through their diary type of a thing. It's
just to keep the lines of communication open and be aware and make sure
but
that
you
he's doing
have to,
okay.
because a lot of times, like, going back to that insidious, like, part of bullying is that a lot of times they don't pick up. Right. But
the
that doesn't mean
nuances.
that it's not leaving an impact or a scar. So they're reading messages and they're like, oh, but it was just that. And I'm like, well, how did you feel after you read that?
Right.
And they're like, oh, I felt really bad about myself, but I really wasn't sure. That's
it.
I
Ding,
think
ding, ding.
that's the piece I see the most in my work, is teens coming in, especially that middle school, early high school age, and they're labeling these things. Things are fine with my friends. And I'm hearing this anxiety about going to school. I'm hearing these feelings about going to school. And as I start peeling back the layers and doing the real work, there's bullying occurring. And because bullying has been talked about so much more as like the kid getting shoved into the locker or these really big actions that we saw on TV shows, there's less maybe like agency to say, hey, this is happening to me. They're also wanting to be included. So saying, hey, mom, my friends are leaving me out. Well, now your mom's going to have opinions about your friends and you want to then defend your friends. So it's this,
And I think what you said too, just about wanting to be included, but also having their own agency. I think kids also don't know nowadays how to pacify themselves, to pick up a book or to do something creative or to do sports. I feel like they're getting that sort of dopamine hit from being involved. But I want to go back to something about what you said about being involved and being aware. What can we say about bystanders and upstanders? So the people who just sit and watch and maybe videotape and put that out there, or the people who actually get involved and say, hey, this is not cool. Because a lot of things that you were saying about the mismatch between what they felt and what they saw, and they dismissed it because it was so innocuous at that point. But so let's talk about the bystanders and upstanders.
well, we know as groups, like we diffuse responsibility, right? We really think as a group, you don't feel that same responsibility. So that's happening.
Bystander effect.
Absolutely. Happening so much in these settings. The interesting thing is it depends who intervenes. And this is something I've been seeing more and more is it depends on the person's status of who intervenes. And so actually what we know is if the coolest kid in school goes and says, hey, that's not cool, amazing. That's going to be so reparative. That's going to feel so supportive. That's exactly what we want to see. But if someone who has lesser social standings or who gets picked on themselves stands up for you, it might actually feel the opposite. And that's a really hard, tricky piece to navigate because we want everyone standing up for everyone. And how can it then show up later?
Yeah. I want to talk about that too.
And I think to that kind of point is, and we touched on it a little bit, is the school's involvement. And unfortunately, you know, I think a lot of schools, school administration, teachers, they have a little bit of that same concept of like, oh, it's no big deal. It's just kids being kids and boys being boys.
Is it because they're afraid to deal with it?
They're afraid to deal with it, right? They don't want the liability. I can't tell you how many times I've heard school administrators and teachers say, oh, well, let's not use that word bullying. No, I could understand, right? Overgeneralizing. I don't let people do that either. Sometimes my son has brought home like a simple example and I'm like, that's not bullying. Hold on. Let's really differentiate.
That,
Right. Absolutely. But they don't want to call anything bullying. And then it's how do our kids, right? How do all kids feel safe in their environment when the adults, the authority figures that are walking around
can't even define it for them.
And they're watering it down. It's that's not a big deal. Oh, but he was your friend last week, so it's fine.
But isn't that so? It's so silly to me that adults can say that's not a big deal because it doesn't matter if you think it's a big deal or not. If that person is expressing, this is how I was impacted, it's obviously a big deal to them.
Right. And I think I try to tell parents, think of yourself in middle school. Think of a moment in your life where you felt like that. And now it might feel silly, but at the time, it was the biggest thing. It was devastating. You're still learning. All you want is belonging. And then that happens. I will say there have been schools I've worked with who are wonderful and who have brought in, like I've spoken to different classrooms. They have really tried to address it. So I think it really...
Are schools doing enough to have these sort of educational, informational sort of talks with children? Are they starting early enough even?
I also think there's a piece of this where the schools don't know where to go with all of the technology. Schools are having students use computers and now some of them are taking away computers. I think that there's this like new element now to bullying that we're all trying to navigate together. Something we know is it's so important for a student to have one, like either it could be someone like a counselor at the school or a teacher to have that one supportive adult at the school can
Right.
make so much reparative difference
Right.
for the child. And so I would
A
say
safe space.
a safe space for the child. So I would say one thing is seeing and helping maybe even your child identify, hey, if something ever is feeling off, why don't you step into Miss so-and-so's office
Yeah.
and to kind of help with that repair.
Okay.
I feel like schools, it's a little bit of a toss up, right? There are some schools that are just not doing enough, truthfully. They're not educating themselves. They're not seeking out trainings, because I get it. It really is a
rabbit
tricky
hole, yeah.
landscape. There's so many different things. I'm even thinking, as you said, the computer thing, like even ChatGPT, right? Now kids are using AI to bully. I had, one child who doctored an entire image to do bullying.
So frightening, because
right?
that
And it's
stays
like,
forever.
that stays forever, and that's out there now.
Yeah.
Right. And so these things can be very, very damaging. And I had to have a whole conversation with this child of what you're doing is not only a terrible thing, it's also bordering on illegal. Right.
Okay.
And like, these are things that children just can't wrap their heads around, which
The concept's too large for
goes
them.
back to, and I know we're going to talk about that as well, the parents of those that are doing the bullying.
Okay, so that's where I want to head to. So let's say, because some schools are really great where they have a mentor who can help them, a guidance counselor, somebody else that a child feels safe and secure and can talk to. And some of them don't know how to deal with it, and they sort of brush off the kids and say it's a learning experience, whatever. But to the next step, once we've identified, yes, you are being bullied, and yes, this is the bully, what does a parent or a school do when the parents of the bully takes no responsibility or acknowledges that their child's doing these behaviors? Like, how do you handle that?
I don't know that I have the full answer as of yet.
Yeah.
As somebody who's also tried to navigate those waters, it's really hard. Like trying to sit in the space of being a parent myself, right? If that was my kind of end of it, I don't know, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how I would, obviously I would have conversations and I would, try to intervene as much as possible. That's a really hard piece to have to unpack yourself of, my child is being an aggressor in some kind of way or a perpetrator in some kind of way.
Right.
And then what does that mean about me? And I think that's always the really hard question.
What the parent thinks, yeah.
Yeah. As a parent, like that's the ultimate kind of, trepidation of like, what did I do wrong? Right. How did I drop the ball? How did I create this in some kind of way? And it's not about that. It's just all of us are humans and we're all navigating life and trying to be as kept together as possible, but it's a messy thing to life is
live so messy
and be it's messy, but I really do think that a lot of times it's touching on those pieces for a parent that feels very threatening of I can't tolerate this. This is somehow a reflection of me, and that's not it.
But they're not even addressing what's going on with the child themselves, the bully themselves.
Yeah, I think it's so important for the parent. I said this to teachers when I was working for Head Start. I'll say this to parents, like regulate their own system first. And so sometimes that's even taking a pause. It's not the perfect parent. It's the good enough.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Just good enough is all the child needs. And so really taking that moment to regulate themselves, notice what's showing up for themselves. Maybe if it's a 2-parent household, tag teaming their partner if they feel really dysregulated in this moment, saying, hey, listen, I need to take a pause. I just heard this stuff. I'm having a hard time coming up with what to say. It's okay not to know. And then I always say lead with curiosity. When possible, ask the child, hey, what's going on? What am I missing? Because if we go into you did this, X, Y, Z,
shame and blame again.
And then the shame. And we know how shame shows up later in life. And so really the curiosity piece. And for the parent too, to be
lead with
curious of what they're
curiosity.
missing.
So what are schools doing? Because we talked a little bit about you going in and speaking to schools. You teach classes. What are schools doing to sort of educate and inform and arm their children? Not enough. I just looked at both of your faces.
It's
not enough.
It's not enough.
Yeah.
I think that's the ultimate kind of answer, is that not enough is being done. And again, super messy. Super tricky to deal with. But
shouldn't we be starting like in kindergarten to let children know that whatever you feel is valid and expressing it is, and then this is the proper way to deal with your anxiety or your stress or however you want
It
to.
is so beautiful, the schools who have people come during that kindergarten
Mm-hmm.
age, and not all have access or resources for
Yeah,
that. But we
that's
know if
true.
we're teaching it at a really young age to the children, but there's this other piece of maybe even like adding in more parent education, maybe
Yes.
parent at
Yes.
schools where they could like almost required like parent sessions on
Required.
what to do.
Yeah.
Because that's the piece that the validating that the kid needs, the curiosity that the other kid's parent needs to do, right? Like that's the tricky
Yeah.
part. If the parents can show up and if the teachers can show up, maybe we can protect the children like top down versus the children having to show up in a way when their brains are still forming.
Right. A lot of times I feel like the parents need a bigger education than children do.
Yeah.
And there's no shame in that. I don't mean that in a nasty way. I just meant that like they need to be more informed, more educated, and a little bit more prepared.
There's so much work and working with especially the littles where I say you're working with the parents, you're working with the family
Right.
system. It's so
And
important.
the parents are learning too for themselves. I mean,
Absolutely.
some of these first time parents, they don't know what they're doing either. So they need help and assistance. So I think we kind of all have to work together for that.
And I think to that point, it's the sense of community, right?
Yeah.
Like we are really all in this together,
Yeah.
right? I'm a parent. Before I was a parent, I was a therapist.
Right.
That does not mean that we know it all
Right.
by any means. We're all literally learning together at the same time.
Yes.
And it's all really wonky, weird
Yeah.
ground.
But it's all okay.
But it's all
if we help each
okay.
other.
Correct. And I
Yes.
think that that's another thing that, to the point of trying to get more of like the parenting education, if schools could even bridge that
Right.
and have like a parent night, right, where we get to talk about these things, and now we get to be shoulder to shoulder, and oh, you too, and me too, in this sense, in that
Right.
sense, and we can grow in that, and even something so small
Right.
as that could play a huge
I
role.
think it's a huge role. And I also
Yeah.
think starting in kindergarten, giving children agency,
Yes.
if you give them information so that they can identify for themselves and sort of take agency for themselves. Oh, this is what I think. This
and
is what I feel.
permission to feel their
Yes.
feelings, right? I think when I'm working with, I see this a lot with the adult male population. From a young age, they're told, be tough, be the big boy. How did you handle that? Don't cry. Big boys don't cry,
Right.
right? There's all these pieces. And so then things show up in individuals' lives and they feel like they don't get to share because that's a weakness rather
Right.
than the repair.
So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about like, how does bullying show up later? That kind of trauma, how does it show up later in life?
It's so interesting. It often doesn't come up in the beginning when I'm working with someone.
Okay.
So I will be working with
Buried
an individual. It is buried deep. I'll be working with an individual and they'll be seeking, let's say, validation from a partner. And they'll feel like, look, that person didn't answer me. There's my proof. They don't like me. They don't want me. It'll show up in these patterns. And when I'm looking at their life and saying, okay, let's step back. Where did you learn that people don't show up for you?
Right.
Where did you learn? Oftentimes, it is so rare that I don't end up at a story buried from middle school, elementary school, and they'll sit there and be like, oh my goodness, I haven't thought of this in years. But their
Right.
brain has, their body
Right.
has, they've held onto it.
Yeah, the memory
and
is
they've
still
made
there.
this script about themselves of this is how I show up in the world. This is how people interact with me. And they've picked accomplices that fit that belief. And so it shows up.
Reinforces it.
It shows up so buried deep. But as soon as we can label, hey, where did you learn that? That's where the healing gets to.
Is there power in the word, using the word bully, like just from a therapeutic standpoint, identifying that and moving forward from it and recognizing the patterns that they have, like you said, attaching themselves to people who sort of help them fit into the role they think they should play?
Yeah, that's interesting that you're asking because oftentimes it will be the friend or it will be someone that they categorize as something else. So renaming them
Right.
as how they showed up, which would be a bully,
Right.
can absolutely say, oh, I'm picking people who almost
Play the same
play
exact
the
role.
same role.
Yeah.
Yeah. I see it a lot in my work with eating disorders
Mm-hmm.
specifically. So yes, I don't see it in all of my cases. I don't see it at the beginning. I usually see it as we're slowly processing and unpacking. And, when was the first time, that curiosity? When was that first time that you ever felt like this? And can we go back there? With eating disorders, it's a really big part of the psychopathology and the etiology of the eating disorder. It's the parent, the family member that constantly comment on their body. It's the kids commenting on their body or their eating habits, right? Again, bullying looks like very, very different from case to case, but that's a form of bullying, right? Where you are constantly being critiqued in how you
also
eat,
all the magazines,
all the magazines
that show you should look like this, you should be like this. This is
the
nobody
societal piece of fat phobia and diet culture and wellness culture, right? Because everything is now packed up pretty as health and wellness, and it's not. It's the same. It's the same thing. It's all diet culture.
Just different package.
It's different packaging, but that's about it. But it really goes back once I start unpacking and we really start looking at the roots of when the eating disorder started showing up in their lives. It's the health class that they took that the teacher made comments about certain foods that they liked, or their body size or their shape. And we're also seeing that way earlier. And we're seeing it, in children, little children.
So hard.
So, that's another layer of the bullying that really shows up in a lot of the work that I do.
There's a piece you're talking about of hearing something, even maybe like repetitive hearing something from someone else. And what I'll hear a lot, and I'll tell my clients, is like, you're bullying your own brain. You have heard these words from someone else, and now they've become your own. And
your inner dialogue.
And I'll often ask, whose voice is that? It's often, when we're getting to the core of the work, it didn't originate from them. It's mom's voice. It's a classmate's voice. It's not their own voice who's telling them these very self-critical things. They learned it from somewhere.
That was part of one of the things I was going to ask you about, is the internal dialogue. We are bullying ourselves
all the time
because we are the only ones who speak to ourselves most frequently in the entire world, more than anybody else does. And we're very self-critical. And I like what you said about when you unpack that, it goes back to whose voice did that originate from? Because that's learned behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. And the shoulds that come with it.
Oh, yeah.
Oftentimes, I heard someone once say, and I totally took it from them, like, you're shoulding all over yourself. You're creating
You're shoulding all over yourself.
You're creating these shoulds of how you should show up in the world. And it came from everywhere else. And now anytime you step outside of your should, now there's shame. And when there's shame, there's disconnected. When there's shame, there's trauma, or there's coping tools like substance use or other pieces.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so how can children develop a sense of regulating so that we don't get to be an adult who constantly shames and disconnects themselves?
Yeah, I think that's like another really big piece of what we're seeing. And Carly, I'm sure you're seeing it. It's our kids now, the younger generations do not have distress tolerance skills. They are so connected and yet disconnected, right? So they're always on something, they're always touching something, they're always doing something, the fidget toys, the phone, the video games. There's so much connection, quote unquote connection, but there's such a big disconnect, because they're not really
connecting. These are little
the
dopamine
distress
hits.
tolerance doesn't need to be there in the same way, because their phone gets to be the distress tolerance tool. I say do little things. I'll tell a teen, every time you're on an elevator, I want you to put your phone down. Every time you're waiting in a line, I want you to put your phone down. So these little moments of building the distress tolerance and getting really comfortable sitting in stillness. The other, you were asking about kind of like the coping and the regulating. I think building the self-confidence is such an important piece. What are the messages you're telling yourself? What are parents saying? At a young age, we know a really healthy way for parents to get to see the best in their kid and for the kid too is labeled praise. So labeling the things you see your child do, that you're really proud of them. Wow, you did an incredible job listening. Oh my goodness, the way you studied for that math test, Really labeling these things to start also helping boost their confidence. So when these things happen, they also know who they are.
It used to be said, catch them doing great things. Yeah, catch them doing good. Because instead of identifying, oh, you shouldn't do that, or you can't do that, or that's not allowed, just really reinforce all of the positive that you see.
Absolutely. I tell parents the behavior you don't want to see, catch the opposite.
Right.
And you'll start seeing the opposite more.
Yeah, because children only respond to what they hear. So if they think that a parent is only going to see them in a negative light, they're just going to behave in a negative way. But if the parent keeps identifying, oh, hey, this was so fabulous, they love that. They love that. It feels so good. Yeah.
We're wired to connect.
Yes. I think that's a big part of it. We're wired to connect. And you talked about like all of the things that the fidget toys and the disassociation. I think this generation didn't grow up in the comfort of silence. Does that make sense? Like learning to pacify themselves by doing something or just being okay sitting with themselves. Like it's okay to just sort of
Be.
Yeah.
I oftentimes like think to like road trips as an example.
Yeah.
When we had a road trip, even if it was like a small car ride,
Yeah.
you just sat with yourself.
Yeah.
Right. You
watch the tree.
You watch the tree.
Put your arm out the window.
The raindrops.
Yeah.
Right. Which one would race down
Oh,
the
yeah.
window
Look at the
faster?
license plates.
The
Yeah.
license plates. Like, you would look at so many different things. And now kids are in the car and they're like, my iPad's not charged. My this is not charged. How long until we get there?
Yeah.
And it's like,
Well, you knew it when the
have
cars
those.
started making them with like video screens in the
Yes.
back of the headrest. I was
Yes.
like, oh, no.
Uh-huh.
Oh my gosh.
But there's so many ways also for kids to regulate their body. There's like different tapping. There's so
But they
much
learn that from their
self-soothing.
parents or from a teacher. An adult has to introduce them to these things.
Yes.
So
And the adult has to model the thing they're wanting to see.
exactly.
And
the other
that's
big
a
one.
Huge.
that's the biggest, I would say, point is I'll see the parent pushing the stroller,
Right.
scrolling their phone. It's going to be really hard for the child to not want to do the
Right.
same. They're watching their parent. They want to copy
Right.
everything their parent does. And
Sure.
why does this parent got to sit on the couch and scroll their phone and I have to just sit here in silence bidding for your
Right.
attention?
Yeah.
And you know, that's also a beautiful point because we parents, adults are doing so much more in comparison to our own
Sure.
parents. And that is not to put down the previous generation by any means. It's just our work looks different.
Yeah.
now,
And there's a lot
right?
more to contend with.
100%. And so I'm always on the phone. I'm always on the iPad. I'm doing this.
Well,
I'm
that's
doing
business,
that.
too.
It's business. It's part of our work.
Right.
And it's really hard because how does the child differentiate
What's work and
my
what's
mom's
play?
on her
Yeah.
phone the entire time and she's yelling at me for being on Roblox? Like,
Right.
what do you mean? And I'm
That's a
like,
great
but I'm
point.
sending emails and I'm
Right,
working on a
right.
PowerPoint
But it
presentation.
doesn't look that way.
And it doesn't matter
Yeah.
to them. And so I think, you know, being able to have that conversation with them and validate, like,
Yeah.
yes, I totally understand
That's a
what this looks
beautiful
like
point.
for
Yeah.
you. And it's a little different. And
Right.
this is not, mommy gets to do something that you don't get to do.
Right.
Right. I know it
I'm
can
not
feel
playing
that
Candy
way.
Crush.
Right.
I promise you.
Exactly. Unless I am. And then I will also admit to that.
Right.
But it is trying to have, again, it's
Yeah.
open lines of communication when
Key.
our children feel heard and understood and they feel like they're part of it. Because a lot of times parents think, my kid doesn't need to know about that. I don't need to talk to them about certain things. I don't have to say I'm sorry. That's another big one with parenting. It's no. Like,
Why? Why not?
Right, exactly. Like we are the role models. Like,
Yeah.
we are not better than. We
No.
don't know
We're
more
learning
than.
too.
We're learning too. We actually might be behind the ball in some
I
ways.
think it's okay to admit that you have made mistakes or that you're sorry for something that you did. And
I think every relationship is going to have the ruptures. What we know
Right.
is it's the repair of the relationship.
Yeah.
And when I'm working with teens, I'll also try to highlight the things the parents did right because I don't have kids yet. And I always say, oh, when they're a teen one day, they're just not going to like me because I
Yes.
hear it all the time. But
Yes.
then I'll start modeling everything that they did right. So they'll say, well, then my mom did this. I'll say, oh, that's wonderful. And they'll be like, huh, maybe it is, right? And so
Maybe she's
it's
not as
these
bad as I
pieces of
think.
you might not get the validation you need
Right.
at that moment,
Yeah.
but the kid's picking up on it. It'll
Right.
show up later.
yeah.
Yes.
Well, you're planting great seeds.
Thanks.
I will say that. Yeah. It's hard. Teenagers, it doesn't matter what you say or what you do. Sometimes it's all wrong just because you're their parent.
Yeah.
And it's a safe place for them to be able to let out their stress and anxiety because they know you're going to love them unconditionally.
And we actually want to see that. I say to parents, if you're seeing the worst version of your child, it tells me you have the best relationship
Right.
with your
Yep.
child.
It's
It
so
tells me your child's body can literally be regulated all day at school, know what it needs to do,
Right.
and then come home and get to just be. I get more nervous when a child has to be on around their parent. That
Yes.
tells me something really
That's
different.
a huge red flag.
Yeah, I want the child to be able to just let go in front of their parent.
Yeah.
Outside of parents being a safe place for their kids, are they being taught children to find other safe places? And how do they find safe places, especially when schools can be a big field for bullying and all the other things going on?
So I like to do experiments with my teen clients. And this has been something that I've seen work so beautifully that now I just like across the board, it's so important, is like having that really trustworthy friend, but really looking through, okay, who is trustworthy? Why are they trustworthy? Do they share with me too? Do I feel like I can tell them? And having them do like little experiments. So if they're in a group and they're feeling excluded, I'll say, who else in your class do you talk to? And there's always someone. There's one class friend, someone you smile at. Okay, let's do one experiment this week where you interact with this person. Now let's do one more. And really starting to build friendship maybe outside of the friend unit where you're feeling hurt, not seen, bullied.
Because that might not be a healthy, safe space for them.
Absolutely. And then help show them what a safe space would be in friendship.
Okay.
Yeah.
God, it's so hard being a kid today.
I know.
Okay, so we talked about how bullying shows up later in life. So how can we sort of, I put here, affirm our humanity and protect ourselves from like an emotional standpoint? Because bullying doesn't happen just for childhood and teens. There's a lot of adults who are still being bullied, whether it's at work or in life. And also maybe they haven't done the homework or the work to sort of unpack the trauma that they dealt with. So how do we sort of get to an emotional safe place?
Obviously, I love therapy.
Yeah.
But I would say something that I like to do is really validate the need for connection we have and to validate why it feels so hard. I think I often hear people shame themselves from the hurt they're feeling from other people of like, I shouldn't be upset. And there is a should again. But I say we're born as humans needing other humans. We can't survive. If we were born in the hospital and no one takes care of us, we will not survive. Our survival instincts
We need each other.
other people. And so to validate that for themselves, when you're feeling disconnected, when you're feeling hurt, your body's telling you this isn't safe. This isn't good.
Listen.
Yeah. And so to validate it for themselves.
I also use the pandemic as an example, right? Because we all endured that. And where I take it back to that evolutionary perspective and that innate desire to connect, we saw that during the pandemic shutdown. Even the most introverted individuals who at the beginning were kind of relishing in this, they're like, okay, I don't have to leave the house and I can do a drive-by birthday party.
Yay.
I was a little guilty of that as a mom who had always way too many birthday parties. I was like, yes, another drive-by. Like, this is wonderful.
I'll make a sign.
Right. I'll make a sign, drop off the gift, keep on going. But we saw as it dragged on, and I actually got invited to talk about the pandemic piece as it was happening. We saw that people were not doing well, right? We saw that the individuals that were very introverted that at the beginning seemed to be okay relatively with the shutdown, they started itching for connection because at the core, we all need to connect.
Sure.
We need it. We live off of it. It's evolutionary.
Well, I think we all want to be seen.
Yes.
And we all want to be heard. And we all want to be loved.
And included.
Yeah.
And that's, it goes back full circle to the concept of bullying.
Yeah.
It's really, really hurtful. And it's threatening to our being to be left out and or hurt by another individual.
And I think it makes that imprint on a child for a lifetime.
It does.
Ooh, heavy stuff. Okay, so what are the most important sort of takeaways from this and also implications on how we can respond to bullying?
I'll start with the how to respond.
Okay.
I would say as a parent or caregiver, validating the feelings, starting off, regulating themselves and saying, that must have been really, really hard. Tell me more. Or just leaning into the curiosity and the validation and really meeting them when they're at. Then pausing before solution. Oftentimes as adults, we want a solution, everything in the moment.
Stop problem
We
solving,
know as
Mom.
adults, when we tell our partners, for example, something, they try to fix it. We're like, wait, we
I
just
want
wanted
to
you to
vent.
listen. And so really doing
Share
the
space.
thinking, let me show that I'm listening first. Then I'm going to pause. Now, is it two different realms? Is it mean kid behavior where I'm going to validate and then tomorrow before school check in and say, okay, what's our plan for school today?
Right.
And help fix prior? Or is it this bigger thing where then needing to come back and say, hey, listen, this is a safety piece. My job is to keep you safe.
Right.
Here's how we're going to do it. How does this sound? Giving the child, especially if it's more like a teen,
Right.
choice around it. Giving them as much autonomy as they can,
Right.
while you as the parent are kind of coming up with the ways in
Right.
which to do it.
Right. Do we approach the school? Do we talk to a guidance counselor? Do we do this? Right. Okay. I like that. Giving the children the choice to how do we going to approach the situation.
Yeah. And I think ultimately in our line of work, it becomes communication, right? So it's that line of communication where you're hoping to create that safe space for your child where it's, hey, I may not know all the answers, right? But we will figure it out together. And I also want you to be in a place where you feel like you can come to me and talk about even the most benign or what you presume is benign, because that's the other piece, to help sort through things.
Right. And I think what you said, what's benign and what's not benign, you can help them identify this is something not to worry about. This is something that's concerning.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like be their fact checker in
Yeah.
many ways.
I like
Because
that, yeah.
again, I tell my kiddos all the time, like, you guys are not supposed to know these things.
Right.
You know, it feels like a lot of pressure, but like, let me help you.
Right.
Right. This is where your parents come into
Right.
play of we've gone through some stuff. We've seen stuff.
Right.
It's not the therapist in me necessarily. It's I was a human who also
Right.
went through.
You were a child once?
I was
Really?
I
Shocking.
know, at some point. And so it's that communication. And I think the communication also has to widen
Right.
to school administrators and teachers. And, you know, it's getting the ball rolling.
Okay, I'm going to ask you further with the widening, because we're talking as if the parents are not the bullies. What about children whose parents are bullies?
I've seen that too.
Yeah.
And
Where does that child go for help?
it's so
Another
sad.
relative, another school person? Or?
And I think, you know, going back to the school piece, this is also the disadvantage. And I get it. It is really hard, but the school has a very big responsibility to all the children. And I've had to navigate these waters, not just being the mom of the child that's being bullied. I have had to literally say to the administrators,
That the parent is the bully.
what about the other child? Have you checked in?
Yeah.
Because this is indicative, right? Like
Right.
usually these children are seeing this, learning this, picking up on this,
Sure.
and or they're acting out because something is happening psychologically.
Absolutely.
And, you know, again, a lot of schools are dropping the ball because even when they do pay attention to the bullying, they're paying attention more so to the child receiving it.
Right, the victim.
And it's
Not
there's
the one
something
who's
happening.
yeah. What's
There's something
happening?
behind the scenes with the other child.
Yeah, what's
and
happening
we
with
need
the
a
bully.
temperature check.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I used to work at when I was in Colorado at a high school for kids who had been either expelled or at risk of expulsion, a lot of them for bullying or those behaviors. And it was this like beautiful therapeutic school. And a lot of the work we were doing was there was a lot going on at home. There was a lot of hurt these kids were facing. There was an element of curiosity that they needed someone to sit and see them
Right.
and hear them.
Right.
And that had all of the repair in the world. And so really like I keep going back to that curiosity piece,
Right.
but being so curious on what's showing up for
Right.
that student.
And where it originated.
Absolutely.
Right.
And how to help.
Right. Yeah, because this is not something, if you don't deal with the issues, again, we'll go back to what we said about it manifesting later in the relationships that you have when you're older, how you deal with not just, you know, a spouse, but coworkers or your own children later on in life.
And we can build empathy too, right? We can help them understand and empathize with other people of
Right.
how might this person be feeling if you were in their shoes, right? Like we can play
Right.
the in the shoes game, or we can play, you know, if it's a younger kid, some play therapy around
Right.
really
Yeah.
understanding how someone else will feel.
Yeah. I use the quote a lot, hurt people. And, you know, it really gives the idea of this is coming from pain a
Right.
lot of times, usually. That's the origin. And then the pain just continues to spill over
Sure.
onto everyone. But again, it's not just the child being bullied. It's
The bully themselves.
The bully themselves. It's also enduring, you know, who
Some
knows
their
what.
pain is originating
Their
some from
pain
them.
is there.
So what is the last thing that you want your parents to know and the school and the children to know. It's the most important thing for those.
The children, I'll speak to them, that they don't have to be in it alone, that
Okay.
it feels really lonely and isolating, but that they can pick someone to share it with, and they don't have to sit in this
Got it.
alone. There gets to be growth and healing
Got it.
afterwards.
I'll take the parents
Okay.
and the schools.
Okay, good.
I think it's what we were saying earlier, that this is not a reflection of you, that we need to be able to zoom out and really look at what is happening here,
Right.
which is so hard to do. And I have a deep empathy in those situations, but it is not about you. There's
Right.
no finger pointing. There's no blame
Right.
to this. This is a collective
Yes.
community piece of, we're all dealing with this in some capacity and in some kind of way. And can we just work together?
Yeah. I think you both are brilliant about that. It's all about information and communication and connection.
Yeah.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you. This
so
was so
much.
fun.
So
Did I
much
leave
fun.
anything out? Is there anything that we didn't address that we... No? We'll think about it on the car ride home.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. I'm so honored that both of you were here.
Thank you.
We're so
This is
honored.
fabulous.
This is
fun.
amazing.
Okay, I got one more fun thing if you're game for it. At the end of each episode, I do a thing called Quickie Questions.
Ooh.
You good?
Yes.
Okay, first question. What did you learn from something that hurt you? Because we're dealing with bullying and trauma today.
That it can help you then show up for other people who feel the same.
Oh, good.
Yeah, that's a really good one. And
Lead to connection.
yeah, and that's probably the root of why I'm also a
You
clinician.
do what you do,
right? It's going back to the point of, we are all humans. And I say this to my students all the time, like, you have a human in front of you. This
Yeah.
isn't a client, a patient.
Right.
It's a human
It's a person
who
with
takes their
feelings.
own shape.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think, also the hurt people
Yeah.
is that this is also coming from somebody who's hurting. And that's
Right.
not to invalidate your pain that you have suffered and endured at the hands of whoever. It's also just trying to understand that it's a dynamic.
Right.
There are
And
different
encourage
layers.
empathy.
Yes, absolutely.
Got it. Okay, what animal are you most like?
I love elephants. I find them to be like, they stay as a community.
Yeah.
They support the littles. The moms are so warm and maternal. I just have always gravitated towards them. So I'll say elephant.
Okay.
Oh, that's
Or more so, I'd want to be part of. I would
Right.
want to be an elephant.
I do love elephants. I was once told that I was very much like a cheetah. And I was like, why? And I think it's because I'm typically very dynamic, and
I
I'm
like that.
always doing a lot of different things. So I think I'll stick with a cheetah.
I like
Yeah.
that. Okay, favorite or most used word?
One of my favorite words is superfluous.
Superfluous.
beautiful.
That's a good one.
really love that word.
Superfluous. I like
Mhm.
that.
I would say, in terms of therapy, I would say it depends.
It depends.
Everything feels like it depends on the person.
So my students laugh at me because I'm always like, this is a depends answer.
There's nuance in everything.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. Okay. I got two new good ones. All right. Last one. Who or what inspires you?
I'm going to say my kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
a good
My
one.
kids, they're so different in just every domain. But I really get to see from different vantage points, like how different they are and the reasons why they're so different.
They're great
And
teachers.
They really are. They humble you
Oh, yes.
daily.
Yes. Yes.
They're so inspirational, seeing them just walk through life. And again, it's like the little things that they navigate, but also the bigger things when they've had to deal with bullying and
Yeah.
other hurtful situations. I would definitely say
Yeah,
those
your
are
kids.
my two little people.
I would say my clients and their vulnerability and their willingness to share and their hope
Yeah.
towards healing.
Yeah.
I like that. Their hope towards healing.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
This is
Thank
wonderful.
you.
Oh, good.
Amazing.
We're going to have more to talk about afterwards. I'm
Yes.
going to do my sign off and then. To our listeners, thank you so much. So grateful you're here. Keep listening, keep learning, keep laughing, keep up with Beek on Being. Listen to Beek on Being wherever you get your podcast. All episodes are automatically transcribed. DM us to share thoughts, ideas, or nominate a guest. Big shout out and a huge thank you to Stephen Chan at Penthouse Studios. Woo! Beek on Being was recorded at Penthouse Studios and is a proud member of the Penthouse Podcast Network. Thank you guys.
Yay,
That was
thank
so. Did you
you.
enjoy?
That was
was so
amazing.
fun.
I
Oh,
loved it.
good.
I
I'm so
loved
glad.
it.
Scary.
Less
That's
scary?
How nervous I was. Yeah.
Yes.
No,
Absolutely.
it was wonderful. I thought it was really informative, and I think it was terrific. And I'm so glad that you guys are out there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody needs you both. Yeah, this world is in need of a huge dose of empathy.